Hello, I'm Alton Irwin with COCM, and welcome to the Student Housing Matters podcast. As many of you are aware, we are celebrating 20 years of COCM being in the student housing management industry. And one of the things we've been doing the last several weeks is looking back, talking to some of our former employees. And today I'm very pleased to have Erik Elordi, who is now the Director of Campus Services at the University of Idaho. Welcome, Erik.
Alton, it's great to be here.
Well, why don't we start out by you telling us how you came to COCM and what your role was here when you were here?
Absolutely. So it really kind of goes back to 2011. And at the time, I was the Assistant Director of University Housing at Southern Oregon University. And I also, throughout my career, one of the things that have been very important to me is professional development and being involved in the professional associations and really giving back to the professions. And in 2011, I joined the board of directors of Northwest ACUHO, so the Northwest Association of College and University Housing Officers. And that is when I met my first COCM employee, Lauren Pygott. Lauren was the Assistant Director of Operations at Green River College, just outside of Seattle. And she was the secretary on the board, and I was the Oregon rep on the board of directors. And so that was like my first kind of foot into all this. And, you know, I think there was a time, at least in my career, where the thought of working for a third party or outside of a university was kind of scary. And it wasn't, the dark side. And lo and behold, I met Lauren. I was like, wait, actually, she's a really good person. And there's no way she would work for someone that is not a good group of people in a good company. And so that was kind of my first foot into it. And I always like to joke that every great job I've ever gotten, I got through Northwest ACUHO. And so my very first job out of college, I was a resident director at Oregon State, and I got that through Northwest ACUHO. Well, so I meet Lauren and I start to learn more about what she's doing. And it was about 3 years later that there's a posting that I see for a role at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle. And I was kind of getting ready to look at what I wanted to do next and where I wanted to go. And this job really ticked all of those boxes. And lo and behold, it was with COCM, that company Lauren had worked with. And she had since left Green River and gone to Arizona State University, Taylor Place. So she was still working for COCM, but in a new role. And so I had to do some verification, you trust, but you got to verify. And so I give Lauren a call. And I'm like, I've seen this role, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to leave working for a university and what that means. And, she gave me the advice that I always try to give people, well, apply for the job. And if you don't want to take it, you don't have to. But, you owe yourself to find out about it and learn more about it. Well, of course, I drug my feet. I was like, I'm still not sure. And she sent me an email a couple days later. She's like, I talked to Masha, and Masha Sapper was the regional for that account. She's like, I talked to Masha. She said, you haven't applied yet. So what's your problem? Why don't you just do this? And I was like,
nothing like great.
Okay. And so I submitted, I turned in all my stuff to Masha that same day. And that was it. And it was kind of a fun process, though, because I did an interview first with Masha. And then I did an interview with Tanya Newmeyer, who was one of the vice presidents, and had really great conversations. Well, it just happened that the time between when we did those interviews over Skype and when I was looking to do a campus interview was a COI. And so while I was at a COI, I actually got to meet Masha and Tanya and a lot of other people that knew other folks at COCM while we were at the conference. And that was I think it was the 2014 conference in Washington, D.C. And that kind of was what sealed it for me through that process, getting to meet all the people and that nudge from Lauren. Whenever I see her, talk to her, I always tell her that without that nudge, I don't know that I would have done it. And so I really owe a lot to her for that.
Wow, great story.
Yeah. So that is how I ended up, though, working with COCM. And so I was the director of residential facilities at Cornish College of the Arts. And I did that for about 2 or 3 years. And they had struggled during that time with a lot of turnover in their residential life program. So we were just doing operations and facilities. But I had a background that included res life. And so after a few years, they approached us and asked us if we would take on the residential life portion of it as well. And so I did about 3 years in his residential facilities, and then another 2 or 3 years as the director of housing and res life. And so we were able to grow that portfolio and that account and what was happening there. And that's about, 5 years was about that time. I was like, okay, well, what's next? We've got this, things are going well. What's next? And that is when I saw an opportunity to continue to work at the company, but in a different role. And it was with, or as the national director of conference services. And so it was really focused on how do we monetize all of these assets that we manage over the summer months? Because a lot of our properties are 9.5 month agreements. And then there's this time in the summer that they can kind of just sit empty. And so there are so many ways that we are able to do that. And that was my next role with COCM. Unfortunately, Jeremy Biddy, who was my supervisor in that time, offered me that job on January 5th, 2020. And wouldn't you know it, 2 months later, everything changed and summers weren't what we thought summers were going to be. And so it was a really challenging time because I had this new job. I was hungry. I would be like, when you start something new, you get so excited and you really want to hit it hard. And then it just became we just watched as one by one, all of our sites said, we're not doing anything over summer. And it just kind of, it was really hard. But what that really taught me, though, and what's great about COCM is that I was able to use my skills in a lot of other ways for the company during that time, because it was a hard time for a lot of people. And so being able to support our site staffs in a lot of other ways, and some of that was kind of the last thing I did before I left COCM was we had taken on a new site in Baltimore that was 929, and it was affiliated housing with Johns Hopkins Medical School. And I got to go and spend about, I think, 6 weeks there helping them transition that account onto COCM. And so I got to do a lot of things. I didn't get to do what I thought I was going to, but sometimes that's okay, right? Because I got to do a lot of other things that I wasn't expecting. And that's what makes, I think, working in student housing exciting, is if you just went in every day and did the same old thing, that's no fun. And so every day I've got something new to do. And yeah, that's my little kind of journey through COCM and the roles that I had. So I got to work and do that site staff work, but then also be here in the corporate office and work with folks here in Alabama, which was really exciting, and form these relationships that, really, like I said, started almost 12 years ago with Lauren, and now this COCM is such a big, important part of my network. So,
Sure. I have a question. It's interesting. A lot of the people that we hire from Residence Life tell us that they learn about the business side of running housing and that they never got to do that before. Was that your experience as well?
It wasn't. So before I started with COCM, I was the assistant director of University Housing, and I oversaw our operations. Right? Okay. So I supervised we had 3 accountants, all of our conference services. We had centralized facilities, and so I was that liaison with our facilities folks, and so I was already in. So
operations. Actually, it was a strength you brought.
Yes, it was.
And Cornish,
yeah, and at the time they were running their own Residence Life program, and so it was a nice fit for me to be able to bring some experiences that were. And Cornish is a small school, right? Like it was 400 students in the residence halls, 600 students on campus total. And so being able to bring, a level of sophistication that was a little bit beyond what they had typically had was, I think, super helpful. But that's what COCM does at all the sites that they work with, right? They're able to bring resources to the table that maybe they wouldn't be able to get otherwise.
So now you're at University of Idaho and director of campus services. So tell me about that. What is that? How has that been? Not been there very long, but so tell me how that's been for you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to hit 2 years in August, and it started out as a very really focused on our third-party contracts, and so I was working our dining we're contracted through Chartwells, and we've got pouring and vending with Swire Coke, and we also have we do our own apparel and everything at our bookstore, what we call the Vandal Store, University of Idaho Vandals. But we have all of our textbooks through Texas Books. So there were all these third-party contracts that were kind of getting managed by different people in different ways. And so the idea, this was a new role, was to bring all those together in-house. But and this is very, I guess, common in my career, I'm not real great at just doing what people ask me to do. I always end up with just kind of there's more happening, right? That's pretty common. And so it started with those contracts, and then I took on campus mail. And so we're looking at that, and that's all internally operated, but it was an important piece of our campus operations and as a service. Campus operator. So, if you call that generic University of Idaho phone number or that generic University of Idaho email address, those all come through my office. And we just kind of had these pieces. And what I kind of like to say is they were all the things that weren't big enough to have like one director over them, but so they were kind of orphaned out there, and we just kind of started pulling all those things together. And last year, probably about March or April, we had some bigger changes that happened at the institution, and our director of housing moved on. And the AVP of Auxiliary Services, who I report with, they saw this as an opportunity to continue to kind of consolidate some of those campus services together. And so with my housing background, housing and residence life then also came into that portfolio. And so we've got all of those components now that are within campus services, and spent the last year kind of reorganizing everything to kind of fit all the different pieces. So I've got 3 associate directors, one that's really focused on dining, one that's focused on operations, not just housing operations though, that's where our campus mail fit in and some of those other components and pieces. And then of course an associate director of Res Life who focuses on the Res Life pieces. And on top of that, though, lots of exciting things happen. So we do contract out our dining, but we kind of 50-50 do. So they run our residential dining in a lot of our retail places. So we've got a Chick-fil-A, a Qdoba, some of those places in our student union. But then we also operate a number of kind of dining components on our own internally. Mm-hmm. And so I was just telling you a little bit about, we have a PGA golf course, 18-hole golf course, and we're putting in a new restaurant there, and that's something that we're self-operating and are operating ourselves. And so there's all these, little pieces that just kind of keep falling into the area that, as long as they'll have me, I'll keep doing that. So I don't want to empire build. That's not what I'm trying to do. But one of the things we have seen though is as we've consolidated different areas, we're finding efficiencies both in terms of costs and the budget of running those, but then also just in the operations themselves. And so as long as we can find those efficiencies and make sure that we're providing the best service possible to our students and to our other customers, whether that's faculty and staff on campus or someone who wants to play a round of golf up at the golf course, we want to be able to do that.
What do you enjoy most about what you're doing now?
Well, I already said it, which is not really knowing what it is I'm going to do one day to the next. I love it being varied. I love never boring. Yep. There are days that I'm focused on dining, and there are days that I'm focused on housing. Right now, we're in the position where I've got about 300 more students that want to live on campus than I have space for.
Oh,
and
wow.
So we're in the process of master leasing some space in the city of Moscow, and going to turn that into a residence hall for the next several years as we kind of work through what does our on-campus living experience look like. And so, when you do something like that, though, it's there's so many exciting components to it, right? Because it's not just we're finding a place for them to live. It now becomes, okay, this is a little bit further away from dining than our other housing. It would be great. Let's deliver a continental breakfast to them every morning, okay? Wow. And we're finding all these different ways to make sure that they have the same experience there as a student would anywhere living on campus. And so there's lots of creative problem solving that we focus on every single day to try to have that best experience for the students. I think we all know, right, that our students that live on campus, they have better outcomes. They're more likely to persevere and graduate. And so, every student that we can get on campus is another student that we're more likely to see 4 or 6 years down the road walk across that stage
Sure.
and get their diploma. And so that is our big focus. And, like I said, just having something different every day to get to work on to make sure that we're continuing to push for that to happen. That's the best part of the job and what I like most.
That's great. You talked about your relationships here at COCM. Is there anything else that you remember when you think back on your, career here?
I think there are a million things that I think back on and enjoy. So as I said, kind of starting it, the professional development has always been super important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think back to all the great ways that COCM supports their employees through professional development, and whether that's the yearly assistant director and director conferences, lunch and learns, book of the month programs. Like there are all these things that happen that are, I think, really exciting and that I really enjoyed about my career. But I think at the end of the day, though, it's those relationships. It 100% is those relationships. And, I leaving COCM was an incredibly hard decision. And I'll tell you what, there's probably was only 1 or 2 jobs out there would have done it. And both of them, though, at the University of Idaho, where I ended up, which is my alma mater. So getting to go home,
Sure.
being close to my parents, and getting to help a place that I care about so much and love so much. I couldn't turn that down.
Sure.
But the relationships with the folks that are still here are really important. And, I just talked to, Corey Reedy the other day, who was my supervisor. Masha started as my supervisor. Regions kind of reshuffled a little bit, and then Corey was for a couple of years. I just talked to him the other day, and being able to, help him out with, a question about the locks at Cornish and what was fun about Cornish was it was a brand new build, right? So I got there, this 20-story residence hall is under construction in downtown Seattle, and I got to watch the construction finish up and then commission the building and operate it. And so, like, there are, strange things that when you do something that intimate that you never forget, right? Like the strange locks on the doors there and how they work and how to reprogram them when they don't work correctly. So there's all those fun things, and
That's great.
and so getting to be here and see folks again at the office, and talking to Will a few minutes ago and hearing about some of the great new project that you all have coming on board. It's exciting to see all that happen.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we always enjoy when our former employees go on and take positions outside of the company. We're always glad for their success. And so it's really great to hear that you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
So let's close with this. For a new COCM employee, as a former COCM employee, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so again, it's going to be back to that professional development, and you've got something unique here with COCM in that you have so many different types of schools, right? You've got Cornish College of the Arts, Visual and Performing Arts School. You've got large universities like University of Maryland and Arizona State. You've got HBCUs like Bowie and others. Like, you've got all these different components. We've got community colleges. We've got health sciences and medical. And so one of the things I loved about COCM is that ability to move on within the company and grow and progress. And I would really encourage people to do that as much as possible. It can be scary sometimes, but it's really worth it. And when I look back at my career, I tried to do a little bit of everything. I've tried to I worked at Oregon State University, so that large land grant institution, all the way down to something small like Cornish and everything in between. And that has made me a more rounded professional. And you can get all that in the company here. That's and great. Not ever leave. And so take advantage of that. And, strange things happen, like, an assistant director might go out on maternity leave. Well, maybe if that's over the summer and there's not a lot happening on your campus, you can go fill in for that person. Like, those opportunities exist, but you got to ask for them. You got to put your name out there. to make those types of things happen. And so take advantage of all that. Take advantage of all the different types of institutions that COCM works with, all the different supervisors that bring different strengths to the work that they do. It can be really easy to get super focused on your one site, but that is part of something much bigger. And if you don't take advantage of that, you're going to regret it when you leave.
Well, we certainly are glad for your new role at University of Idaho. I will say you're missed, your energy and your creativity, and just there are a lot of people here who really have enjoyed their relationship with you. So thank you for taking time to chat with us, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks so much, Alton. It was great to see you and catch up.